What is the most disturbing thing to know? Not safe for work. Posted one day ago. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Sarin gas is one of the worst ways to kill another human being, and we have seen multiple instances where it has been used on innocent people. Whether relaxed or contracting, your muscles need certain signals in order to function. When you flex a muscle, a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine floods the muscle cells, telling them to contract. Your brain eventually tells the muscles to stop contracting, and so that acetylcholine has to be removed. This is done with acetylcholine esterase, an enzyme which breaks it down and allows your muscles to relax. This happens for every movement of every muscle in your body, whether you're flexing your bicep or blinking every beat of your heart. Sarin kills because it bonds with acetylcholine esterase, completely changing its structure and rendering the enzymes useless. This means your muscles never relax. They flex harder and harder and harder. Your entire body can cramp your pupils, everything. The burning gets worse and worse, and the pain is unbearable. If enough of it enters the bloodstream, usually via skin, it will lock up your diaphragm and you will asphyxiate. It kills quickly, but I struggle to imagine too many things that would be worse than dying from cramps in your muscles you didn't even realize existed. It's not the worst weapon humans have at their disposal, as if you survive a sarin attack, you're likely to make a full recovery, as it doesn't scar lung tissue like other chemical weapons. That being said, it's still classified as a weapon of mass destruction and is supposed to be banned. Cyanide poisoning is an incredibly painful way to die. Cyanide was what Jonestown consumed for mass suicide. Parents were instructed to give it to their children and convinced that crying was just fear. One aspect of foster care. Some people will take their child to a doctor. Child gets diagnosed with cancer. Child goes to first appointment. Kid gets wheeled back for treatment. Parents then leave, go home, pack, and disappear. The kid is in the treatment waiting room, waiting for parents that will never ever come, sick and facing death alone. It doesn't happen a lot, but enough to have processes in place. The worst is when they're like 4, although a 7-year-old was rough. That's horrible. Pelicans are some of the most demonic birds in existence, if not some of the most demonic creatures. Pelicans will go into other birds' nests, shove their parents out of the nest. They will then swallow babies whole, fly back to their own nest, and regurgitate the still half-alive, partially digested babies to their own babies for them to consume. Some pelicans are literally raised on the partially digested living flesh of other baby birds. By the time you show symptoms of rabies, it's already too late. It can be dormant for a year before you show those symptoms. The Nutty Putty Cave accident. Google for full disturbing details. A map of the cave, but basically a guy got stuck caving in a very narrow, unmapped tunnel upside down. They could not get him out, but almost did. One of the rescuers made eye contact with him apparently, but then their pulley system broke and he fell further down. Unfortunately, he ended up dying of cardiac arrest from being upside down for so long, and they couldn't get him out and never retrieve the body because it was too dangerous for rescuers. Truly so disturbing. I have thought about it probably once a week since I found out about it a few months ago. Polar bears are the only bear species that actively hunt and kill humans for food. There's a rhyme that everyone living where bears live needs to know, and why the rhyme is so important. If it's brown, lie down. Brown or grizzly bears will leave you alone if you play dead. Climbing up a tall tree works with adult brown bears since they can't climb trees. If it's black, fight back. Black bears will back off when they realize you're more of a threat than they realize, but do not climb a tree to escape. Both cubs and adult black bears can climb trees. If it's white, say goodnight. Polar bears are not only the largest bears, but they are ambush predators. If one manages to sneak up on you, you're as good as dead. The best you can do to escape is either run and drop your clothes. Fortunately for you, they have very short attention spans, and they'll stop momentarily to sniff at your clothes because it's not normal for their food to suddenly drop something like that, or start praying to whatever deity you believe or don't believe in. If an elephant's mate dies, then they can die from broken heart syndrome. Often, burnt bodies are found in the same stance, known as the boxer pose, due to muscles contracting from heat. It's an incredibly disturbing looking thing. I first heard about it from my grandfather that fought in Burma. During the war, he was present at a Burmese funeral in which the cadaver was burnt on a pyre. Just as the flames began to singe the corpse, it sat up straight. The Burmese, of course, got a good laugh out of the British soldiers collectively shitting themselves, as contractions due to heat during cremation is apparently rather common. Doesn't make it any less creepy. I work as an anesthesiologist. I've put people to sleep in an emergency situation knowing that they will almost certainly not survive the surgery. These are generally situations where without surgery the patient will not survive, but even with surgery, the chances of survival are still small. In most of these instances, the patients are too obtunded or aren't conscious enough to be aware of the gravity of their situation, but in a number of instances, the patients have been conscious, talking although clearly anxious. I try to reassure and tell the person that we won't leave their side, that we will take care of them, and that they will be fine. It kinda fucks me up a bit to say this to someone, but I always include the last part because I just don't see the point in telling them the truth. I had one guy tell me he felt like he wasn't going to make it. I told him he would make it, but knew he wasn't going to. I put him to sleep, knowing that the last human face he would see before he died was mine, as he stared up at me as I held an oxygen mask over his mouth and nose. I'd consider myself quite a resilient person, but knowing this stuff is a bit of a load to carry around. Heavy. That if you have ALS, you are more than likely going to suffocate to death. My mom used to work for this elder gentleman who suffered from ALS. One day she gets a call that he's passed away in his apartment. From what she told me, she walked in and his eyes were wide open and his mouth was open permanently, left gasping for air. ALS is a neurodegenerative disease that causes people to lose control of their nerves over time to the point of near vegetative state. Most people don't last very long once diagnosed because they lose the ability to expand their chest to breathe and pretty much choke to death. That sadder thing about it is that you could be fully awake when this happens and have no way of stopping it. Necrophilia in wars and battlefields. It is known that at the time of violent death, the victim suffers from spasms of the anal sphincter. Many potential necrophiles have sought to take advantage of this fact by engaging in anal intercourse with dying soldiers on a battlefield. Soldiers during the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878 and Moroccan campaigns of 1919 to 1926 were violated in this way on the battlefield. 2445, the practice has been termed warm necrophilia, although the term is more suitably applied elsewhere. Please see Chapter 3 classification. The Chinese are known to engage in sexual intercourse with geese to kill them intentionally at the point of ejaculation for simple reasons. During the infamous Nanjing Massacre, often referred to as a rape of Nanking, in 1937, Japanese soldiers raped an estimated 80,000 Chinese women. Since the Japanese army had officially outlawed the rape of enemy women, Japanese soldiers found it convenient to murder Chinese women after raping them. In many cases, Chinese men were forced to commit acts of forced necrophilia, on the murdered women. At least one Chinese man was murdered because he refused to commit necrophilia with the corpse of a woman in the snow. Marilyn Monroe's case, 1962. It has been alleged that necrophilia was committed on Marilyn Monroe's dead body too, after she died August 15, 1962. Noguchi, who performed Monroe's autopsy, found 8 milligrams of chloral hydrate in her blood and 13 milligrams of pentobarbital, Nembutal, in her liver tissue. On this basis, the cause of death was given as suicidal overdose of barbiturates. However, Noguchi also noticed a fresh bruise spanning Monroe's lower back and hip, which might have indicated violence, but this was ignored. Deputy Coroner Lionel Grandison signed the death certificate under protest and later resigned his position. In 1978, he disputed the suicide diagnosis, claiming his signature was forced. He also described numerous bruises on Monroe's corpse that were not listed in Noguchi's report, suggesting a violent struggle prior to death. He claimed that one or more necrophiles employed at the county morgue had violated Monroe's corpse before it was released for burial. Source: Necrophilia, Forensic and Medical Legal Aspect. One of the scariest and most disturbing things I've watched on the internet is that one guy's slow descent to insanity because its brain lost its ability to sleep. He vlogged regularly until he died. That's one of the most disturbing things I know, that anyone, including myself, can have their last sleep without knowing it. Early childhood malnutrition, between ages 0 and 5, causes irreversible loss of IQ, 11 to 20 points, and predisposes people to higher levels of violence. Prefrontal cortex doesn't develop the same, and if you miss that window, there's no intervention that can recover the gap. I live in South Africa, highest Gini coefficient in the world, highest unemployment, third highest violent crime rate, one of the worst education systems in the world, and it fucking keeps me up at night. I wonder if we changed nothing except introducing a 1 nutritious meal per day feeding scheme for ECD, what would happen? It hurts. The disk of our home galaxy, the Milky Way, is bigger than we previously thought. A new study shows it would take 200,000 years for a spaceship traveling at the speed of light to go across the entire galaxy, at light speed. For every 1 human cell in your body, scientists estimate there are 1 in 10 non-human cells, aka lots of little microorganisms living inside of you. A cardiac tamponade is when your heart literally chokes itself to death. If a blood vessel inside the pericardium leaks, a tough membrane protecting the heart's pumping will force blood into the space between itself and the pericardium. As the space fills, the heart can't pump anymore due to a lack of space. It literally drowns in your own blood. That it literally just takes 1 person to decide to kill you in any situation. The fact that someone can choose you randomly to kill, they might be caught and arrested, but they would have already killed you. No one can really prepare for it. Radiation overdose. Now, I'm not talking about going to the beach without sunscreen or getting x-rayed through your skull. I'm talking Chernobyl levels of radiation. Radiation will literally fly through your body and shred apart the DNA in your cells. Without the DNA, your cells don't know what to do. Most cases of this lead to cancer, but with a lethal dose of radiation, your cells literally begin to die and dissolve. People who were helping to contain the Chernobyl incident would literally collapse and lose functionality in their bodies within minutes of being on site, as their organs began shutting down and veins began dissolving, spilling watery blood throughout your body. There was a man who spent a couple of days in emergency after receiving a lethal dose, and his body was literally melting away as the staff tried to keep him alive. His wife had to pull bits of coughed-up organs from his mouth to keep him from choking, and his skin was fusing with the bedsheets. It was a miracle that he survived so long, but he wanted to die long before. If we see a life-threatening meteor is going to strike us in a few years, we probably, at least at the moment, couldn't do anything about it. They've had training simulations with this exact scenario, and they only got it right like 10% of the time. They need more like 10 years to reliably and consistently stop it. A gamma ray burst, or even a cosmic raystorm, could cause a near-instant mass extinction event. These both probably have affected life on Earth before. Both are common events in space, basically random, and our only protection is the vastness of space. That the majority of humans will wait until life-threatening problems become unsolvable before they try to fix them. I work for an environmental consultant agency, and our major clientele are usually larger companies such as alternative energy and commercial real estate companies looking to build storage facilities amongst other things. In my environmental law class, I learned a lot of disturbing things about major companies I never knew. Without going into specifics, it is quite illegal to not comply with EPA regulations. In an effort to avoid complying, a lot of companies or individuals will literally refuse to pay EPA compliance fees and instead just pay government fines. Why? A middle finger to the EPA most times, which is ironic as the fines set by the government are larger than the EPA fines most times. It's also considered a white-collar crime, so many of these companies and people get off with probation, a little bit of jail time and more fines. In other words, there's a lot of companies out there that literally get away with butt-fucking the environment and pay very little price for it. Yeah. I worked as a palliative carer for about 3 years. I looked after terminally ill people who had chosen to die at home after being discharged from hospital. After a while, you learn some telltale signs that people are deteriorating. After a bit longer, you start to learn how long people generally have left, even down to a few hours. I always went with honesty. I felt it was my job to support the patients' families as well as the patients. So if they asked how long I thought they had left, I would answer honestly, obviously with the disclaimer that I wasn't a doctor and I could only base it on my previous experiences. The wife of one of my patients told me that their children, adults, were visiting the following weekend to say their goodbyes. I had to decide carefully on what to say next, but I ultimately chose to recommend that they visit the following day at the latest. I regretted saying it because she was devastated. She took my advice, and her husband passed away peacefully 48 hours later after seeing his kids. I'm glad I did it, but upsetting that lady was absolutely gut-wrenching. Some people didn't want to know, and it was their right not to know. That was the worst. In those cases, you had to not say anything. Sometimes they'd say, "See you tomorrow," and I had to reply, "Yes, have a good night, and I'll see you in the morning," knowing full well that they were going to pass in the night. When I worked at the bedside early in my nursing career, I was assigned dying patients who haven't made the call to go peacefully. I guess it's because I'm a big guy, but I'm a softie, and have no shame in hugging it out with family and crying with them. I worked nights. I would chat with these patients when I could. I would tell them the thing no one else would, that they would tell me how hard they're fighting, 85, 90, and beyond, but they're tired, in agony, and they don't want to disappoint their family by dying. But as a nurse, you know that they don't have much left in the tank. Pressures aren't responding to meds, increasing O2 over and over again till you're maxing out on the BIP pad, and they only have a vent in front of them left. I lost my mom as a young adult. I watched her fight. I watched her suffer for us. I told her the same thing I told every other patient in that. We feel your pain, and if you want to keep fighting, you do that. But none of us will be disappointed if you want to punch your ticket on this life. Just let us say goodbye. These people were full codes, save at all cost people, and I still would. I advocate for patients, but respect their choices. 95% of my patients would go on to palliative care within a day. Family would find me often and thank me for guiding their family to a comfortable passing, how they were at peace now. It was an odd gift I was given, but the cost was high. I left part of my heart with every patient who was dying, opening that old wound I drew strength from. Late to the game, but learning this has really affected me, and as a mom of 4, it's hard to wrap my mind around it. A nurse who works at a local children's hospital shared the parents of children who are terminally ill will leave their children at the hospital and never come back, including after they die. Apparently it happens more often than we'd like to allow ourselves to believe. They just leave their children scared and alone while they die, except for the amazing doctor and nursing staff to be with them and comfort them. I can't even fathom it. It makes my anxiety spike every time I think of it. It's just so heartbreaking.